Let me just say before I get into it, I love you guys, and I have a deep respect for both of you. Alrighty, folks, welcome to Dojo Talks. I think we're going to have a good episode today. Just recently, we opened up the Patreon page to allow people to submit questions that we can address on future shows. We got a couple good questions already, and we'll be dedicating today's episode to one of them on our differences in training philosophy and where we kind of disagree with each other on aspects of chess improvement. Before we get into that, of course, you guys probably heard or saw the statement that St. Louis put out, where they did a better job of accepting responsibility on the entire Alejandro Ramirez saga. We were talking about that a lot, obviously, in recent episodes. Chess.com, I forwarded you guys, also put out a statement saying that they're no longer boycotting St. Louis. They're going to be broadcasting U.S. Championship, U.S. Women's Championship, which also coincidentally starts today. So real quick, just to start things off with some housekeeping, I want to ask you guys, what did you think about the statement? Was it good enough? Was it what you were expecting? Were you expecting something different?
It definitely felt coordinated, right? Like the U.S. Championship's about to begin. I'm sure they're upset that chess.com isn't covering it. And so magically this statement appears right before, and then chess.com quickly is like, yep, that's good enough for us. So I think that there was probably some behind the scenes negotiation, which I'm fine with, right? Like my whole thing with Lee Chess was like, you guys didn't say what you wanted. Now I will say this about the statement. It's a very legally thing, involving essentially like people having to do a lot of training. Interestingly, I was like, oh, maybe Coach is going to have to do some training, man. He's working over
I
there.
did the training already. I did the training.
You do a training,
Yeah.
right? So
Nice.
that to me is kind of maybe okay. It feels like, I don't know, but there was never any reckoning of like, oh, this is what these are the people that saw something and maybe should have said something, right? There was never any of that. And I guess for me, that's what I would hope for. Because honestly, we're just talking about a bunch of like, now we have this structure in place where it's never going to happen again. And it's like, well, come on, buddy. Come on. Let's talk about how it happened in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. All the apologies from Randy Bauer at USCF and St. Louis were just stupid. Completely stupid and worthless.
Oh, come on, David. Oh, we're going to get on the sad communist train already, buddy. Come on, man.
Well, yeah, ask us what we thought. It's
Okay.
obvious. It's obvious. It's just stupid. Nobody personally took any responsibility. It's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I can't even I read the whole thing. I couldn't remember anything. It was like reading terms of service. It was just blah, you know.
I think it was a lot better than US Chess. US Chess was like, we didn't do anything wrong. And the club acknowledged they waited for too long to act, and they should have done something sooner. They apologized. They said they were, deeply sorry. I agree with you. Randy's apology felt way less genuine.
Now, let me ask you something.
It's not way less genuine. It's just less skillful. Like, he's just an idiot who wrote it by himself, whereas they had like a committee of lawyers draft something that's equally empty, but like a little bit more intelligently written.
Well, Kostya, you're on the ground there, boss. So just like, did you feel that this training was like actually meaningful or performative?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a whole thing. It was like a 90-minute, 2-hour training. And everyone has to do it if you're working, I believe if you're working like a US chess event, so like US Championship, or if you're working at the club, I believe you got to go through the training. They also hired some new people to handle like HR and complaints and stuff. So people that are like professionals at handling these kinds of issues. So from my point of view, it feels like they took it very, very seriously. And I think part of the reason why it took them so long was maybe because of previous bad legal advice. That's what I get the sense from that US chess statement, is that, they had lawyers that tell them you can't take any responsibility. If you take any shred of responsibility, that opens you up to like lawsuits and liability. And they were like, we can't do that. And the club totally broke that kind of protocol because they did accept responsibility, So yeah, I definitely think they
vaguely enough that it doesn't open them up to anybody actually pursuing them in any way.
I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. I know Jen Shahade shared the statement. She seemed to, she called it powerful. She seemed to like it. Other people as well that were very, very critical of the club seemed to have accepted the statement. So I don't know. I don't think it was, exactly everything everyone was hoping for. But I feel like, I don't know. I wouldn't lump them in with US chess as just being like one and the same. I think there was a vast difference there.
Okay.
All right.
You say?
Well,
did you learn anything from the training?
I did actually. Not too much. I feel like a lot of common sense was, was already enough. But I think I learned a couple things. Like, for example, if someone, let's say, comes to you, a child specifically comes to you with a complaint or something, you're not really supposed to ask them like any kind of like leading questions. You're supposed to just kind of try to figure out the story, but in a very open-ended way, right? Just kind of ask them like, what happened? And just be like very, very open. Apparently, you're also not supposed to tell them that everything is going to be okay. Like, you should just be as neutral as possible and just try to be very, very professional. So those questions I got wrong. But most of the stuff was pretty, I don't know, as you would expect. So,
Okay.
yeah. No, I was just curious.
My theory on most of these trainings is that they're just a way for some kind of consulting company that put together the training to make a bunch of money off of a bunch of organizations, forcing their employees to waste their time in order to say that they've done something, to be accountable for something.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair.
But that's just me.
Reasonable.
Apparently, I'm wrong.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not just it's not just chess clubs that have to do this. It's like all kind of sporting organizations. Anywhere where you have like athletes and students and volunteers and different people working. Also, U.S. Championship is starting. Are you guys going to be following that at all?
Probably a little bit, yeah.
Maybe. Depends whether or not you guys tell me to boycott it or to follow it or to make my own decision.
Why would that be up to us? Yeah, last year you were watching it live. We were doing some coverage here on the channel. So that was fun. I'm looking forward to it. I feel like this is the most important American tournament of the year. It's historical. The winners, they get their names etched in history. So I'm always super. I don't know. I think I'm more pumped about this event than any other, actually, as a fan.
Are you going to be writing copy for the club about the event?
Yeah, I'll be doing the recaps, exactly.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so which gives me more excuses to follow it closely. Spend time.
But
on
did you
that.
see that? Did you see that Hikaru's not playing again?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of annoying, isn't it?
I would definitely have loved for him to play, just so the tournament is as competitive as possible. But I can understand that he's just not into it. He'd rather focus on streaming. This tournament doesn't exactly help him get to the candidates, I imagine. Right? He still has other avenues there, so I kind of get it.
Okay.
All right then. Well, let's get into the Patreon mailbag. So, like I mentioned, we opened up our Patreon page to allow subscribers to ask us questions to get addressed. Either like on Dojo Talks, we might do other streams where we like talk about questions and then clip that and put it out as content or something. But we already had we did this yesterday. We already got a couple of good questions. First one I want to address comes from EJ. And EJ writes, in light of the report by Jeff Sonis on FIDE rating deflation, it would be interesting to know if there is a similar effect in the USCF system. On the Perpetual Chess podcast recently, Ben Johnson asked Sonis about this, but Sonis said his expertise was only on the FIDE system. Mark Glickman is probably the guy to talk to if you guys want to dig into this topic. And yeah, actually, Jesse, you wanted to maybe have a show about this that report that was done by Sonis on the FIDE rating thing. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Personally, this topic for me is very uninteresting. Like, I get why people are into it, like the whole rating thing or ratings being deflated or inflated, but I just don't see how it has anything to do with chess improvement. I just, like, okay, I'm not a mathematician. I think it's a question for like mathematicians and stuff. From my point of view, it's like, if I want to get better at chess, whether I'm 50 points underrated or not, like, has no bearing on what I need to do to improve. So that's why for me, it's just like, talking about this, I don't know exactly. Yeah, I don't find a lot of personal interest on it, but maybe you guys do.
Okay, so I think the reason it's interesting to a lot of people is, even though I'm mostly in concurrence with my personal view on it, I know that out there are loads of people who are saying to themselves, oh, if I'm rated 1900 now, I would have been rated 2000 a couple years ago, right? And so it gives this either nagging doubt or a justification of being like, oh, I'm actually better than my rating. And this is both a comfort and a destruction to the many players who go down this rabbit hole. So that's why there's something at stake in this rating deflation. And a broader picture view, though, it also affects, let's say, your quest for the GM title. You know, if it's true that it's 50 points, oh, Kostya, that's a hell of a burden. That's a hell of a cross to bear, if it's true. You know, back in the day, it was certainly the case that we would say, like, I got my GM title in 2007, and I would have said, oh, if you got your title in 1980, that's much harder than 2007. And then it seemed to me that the years after 2007, that it was getting easier and easier. But in any case, the theory is that it's now become harder, and it's especially in the last 10 years that it's happening. And I'm not an expert either. I didn't push that we do a talks on it because it is so complicated. And it's not just math. It's like a lot of stats and a lot of arguments. And but the basic phenomenon, as far as I understand it, we'll just put out the basic phenomenon, is that if you have a gazillion people entering the lower ranks at the same time, and this is not just pandemic, but also Indian kids. So this is why it's a worldwide phenomenon in US chess. I think it's going to be similar, but maybe not as intense as FIDE, because FIDE is being influenced by this huge influx of like Indian children who are actually probably at least 1600 strength, but have the rating of 500, right? And so then you have like real concerns about rating deflation. And so that's what they're talking about. And I think we should do a talks on it if FIDE moves ahead with the new proposal. Whether the proposal is correct or not, it also has a huge political burden because that will affect how titles are done. You know, like will Kostya achieve the GM title or not? Part of it depends on this ruling. Will Magnus ever have a chance to reach 2800? It kind of will affect that kind of decision. So it's not entirely uninteresting, Kostya. Okay, there's something at stake. It's just really hard mathematically to break it down.
Yeah, there's one other thing at stake. Although I'm not, really pumped up about ratings, but another thing that's at stake is, some people use their rating for some ego stuff, but other people it's a measure, right?
Yeah.
That's why the Polgars did chess, right? Because their father would be able to measure whether or not they were geniuses mathematically. And if the rating system didn't have any stability, he wouldn't have been able to measure it, right? But because the rating system was relatively stable over, a 10-year period, right, he could make measurements. So if somebody's doing a bunch of work over a period of 2 to 3 years, it's useful for them to know if they're getting better or worse, or how the work is landing and affecting their performance, without getting too caught up in, am I a genius or an idiot? Should I love myself or hate myself?
Right.
just as a measure that can be of some use.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I would agree that there's certainly stakes to it. It's definitely like an important topic, and I'm glad that like smart like math and stats people are working on it. Yeah, I just don't see what we can contribute to the conversation other than saying like, yeah, kids are underrated. It's very annoying to play underrated kids, and then beyond that, it's like I don't know. It just doesn't feel like my lane at all, even though it's adjacent to chess.
It's not super our lane, but we get asked about a lot of chess topics that, we may have 1% knowledge to share on it or not even at times, right?
Well, I think where we do have some definite knowledge is to say 1900 does not feel like a 1900 20 years ago.
That's what I was going to say is like, I do think that there is something we can contribute, which is, Kostya, you're out there every day playing with people in tournaments. Like, you're a free dude. You're going around playing chess all over the place. So you see people and you see how strong they are and you see their ratings. And one thing you probably see is, what's the spread between the USCF and FIDE ratings? And you probably don't spend a lot of time poring over people's ratings because you don't care that much. But, normally it's in the 75 to 100 point range. And if FIDE ratings deflated a bunch without USCF ratings deflate, then you would have seen the FIDE ratings sort of converging pretty close to the USCF ratings. Like the difference would be maybe 25 points now instead of 80 points. So you might have some insight off of that. My general feeling is like everybody seems super strong. I've only played, a few people, but the people I played, whether you look at their FIDE or their USCF, it just seemed like everybody was much stronger, knew tons of stuff. So
yeah, no, I would say the level of knowledge has definitely improved, and the skill level has also improved, and also the mindset has improved. Like nowadays, you go to look at any open tournament, you look at round one, there'll be huge upsets. Some 2200 beating a 2600 GM, some grandmaster losing in 15 moves, like draws and stuff, tons of scalps. In the past, all the GMs would just stay on the top boards till like the final rounds. It was just like, it was very rare. But now it's like, you see it all the time. And I think it's taught these kids that they don't have to be afraid of the title players, which is very annoying. I hate that, we taught that to them. And also on the knowledge thing, it's like, yeah, now there's obviously widespread access to opening databases and engines and books. And so people are, in general, I think, just like improving their level. But again, in terms of like the practicality of it, it's like, I mean, we're all under the same system. So if you want to improve, you have to outwork your peers, like the people around you. You have to work harder than they do, train more in order to actually go up. And that I don't think has ever changed. I feel like that's just stayed the same.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's the same.
But interesting question. Maybe we'll
we might
delve into it more. Let's go to the next question. We were all very excited for this next one as soon as
this is the main question of the day.
As soon as we got it. All right, so this one comes from Timothy Seltzer, who asked, what chess training advice, i.e. not the greatest player ever, obviously Philidor, do you disagree on most profoundly with each of your fellow senseis? And how is that tension reflected in the current dojo training program? Okay, so great question. I feel like we should... So we're each going to pick a bone with one of the others, right? And I imagine we're just going to take turns, right? So one of us goes first, and then we'll just go around in a circle. Does that sound good to you guys?
Now,
Perfect.
is this like... okay, I think I understand.
Cool. And I imagine you guys have... Because I got some beef with you guys.
Oh, dang.
I hope you guys are ready as well.
Oh, Timothy, buddy. I didn't realize it was going to get so violent. He said he just wants some... oh, man.
He threw a bomb into the middle of the dojo.
I think,
and he brought his popcorn with him.
I think he threw a match. I don't think he threw a bomb. I think he threw a match to light it up. Jesse, why don't you start us off? You have no issue casting shame.
Jesse's not 100% sure how it works, Kostya. You can kick us off.
Okay, I can start if you guys want.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let me just say before I get into it, I love you guys, and I have a deep respect for both of you. Okay, I just want to say that just so we're all clear. Because sometimes we get comments on YouTube. It's like, wow, do these guys hate each other? It's like, no. Like, we're a family. Sometimes families argue, you know.
Oh shit. Okay.
And I think you guys are both tremendous chess teachers.
He's really gonna let us have it.
And obviously, you know, we've been doing dojo for like almost, I mean, more than 3.5 years now. Okay, so I wouldn't have never have teamed up with you guys if I didn't have a great respect for your chess and your chess teaching philosophy. And that was the reason why, you know, we all kind of teamed up, was because we do share a lot of core beliefs when it comes to chess training. So we agree, I think, on a lot of important stuff. But when it comes to some things, you guys, in my opinion, are very, very dogmatic. Honestly, almost fascistic, you know, and it's a problem, because I know if you guys had chess students that were overly dogmatic, you know, this is where I'm trying to approach you guys, you would tell them like, no, actually you got to open yourself up to like different perspectives. You can't just be so strict, you know, on what you believe in. You have to be willing to change your mind, right? And consider different ideas. Okay. So let's start with Jesse. Jesse, you're crazy when it comes to the time controls in the program. So right now, like, we have these required time controls, okay? If you're 1600 and up, your classical games have to be 90 plus 30 or higher. If you're 1200 to 1600, your games have to be 60 plus 30 or higher, 60 minutes, 30-second increment. 800 to 1200, our requirement is 45, 30 or 45, 15, and then under 800, the classical games have to be at least 30 minutes for each side with a 15-second increment. Now, in general, we all agree that classical games is the way to improve. Like, that's the most important part of chess improvement. But the practicality is driving people insane. So I'll give you guys a couple examples. Number one, you have the Lichess 45-45 league. So it's a game in 45 minutes plus a 45-second increment. These are good, high-quality games. This is a great league. We at the dojo have a hard time running tournaments because, number one, it's all the same people playing each other, so they're just constantly playing each other, taking each other's rating points. Number two, people have difficulty scheduling with each other, so it's great if there's like more players and like an organized league. So this is a great league, but our members in the 12 to 1600 cohorts can't play it, or at least they don't want to, because those games don't count for the classical time requirement, because 45 plus 45 is a little bit less than 60 plus 30 when you add up all the times and increments together. And to me, this is kind of a shame because, you know, would you rather have someone play a 45-minute game or just play 2 hours of blitz or do nothing or do 2 hours of puzzle rush, right? I think we'd all rather them just play that like one game that's still serious. They can have like a nice postmortem and then analyze it. And we can still like strongly suggest that they play the 60 plus 30. And we can add in all the disclaimers we want. Like, you know, you can count these 45-minute games, but we would really suggest something higher rated. And you guys know, people don't have time for classical games like all the time, right? People have jobs, kids, right? It's like, that's one of the biggest complaints people have about the program, is that they often don't have time to dedicate like a 3 or 4 hour chunk to like the classical games that we're asking them to. Another, you know, crazy requirement is that like, we're just so stringent that it has to be 90 plus 30 and like not anything less. A lot of people have like a local club that maybe does like a G75. And according to us, it doesn't count, right? So they're not able to play that like OTB game and have it count for anything, and so they're not doing OTB. It's just like, it's just a shame. It's like, and they end up doing less chess work than they would otherwise. So what I'm asking of Jesse is to just be like a little bit more understanding, right, of the fact that people have very tough schedules. They want to get their classical games in, but we're just saying like, no, those games don't count. And yeah, I think that's a shame.
Okay.
This was also what I was going to bring up with Kostya, Jesse.
I'm just gonna let you roll, buddy. I was gonna say this, you go.
I'm not very confident that we're right, but we are 2-1 against him on this.
Yeah.
Which is I just this is, I mean, I think this is the most fundamental thing to the program that we've disagreed on is that I've disagreed on with Kostya is the time control, and in this case, I was on Jesse's side with it, which was to not make concessions, and because then where does it stop? You know, you need to actually have a line of demarcation, and if you're wishy-washy, and then take another 10 minutes off, and then once the real line is 75 minutes, then why not 60 minutes, and why not 55 minutes with a 5-second delay, and why not 48 minutes plus 7-second delay, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's fine for people to go play a 45 game, and we would encourage them to do that over Puzzle Rush, et cetera. There's all kinds of great stuff you can do for your chess. It's just not all going to mark points for you. And if we're talking about the 90 plus 30, these are people over. Well, we don't have to hash out the argument now. I'm not very confident we're right, but I think we're right. It's very hard for somebody over 1800 to make progress, just very, very hard. And there's all kinds of things they can do to work on it. And you can play training games that are faster. They're probably not going to get you there, but go for it.
So really, this complaint is against both of me and David, because I think me and David are kind of one mind on this. And by the way, at the dojo, the only reason the dojo exists is because when it comes to matters like this, it's 3 votes, and then just who's ever outvoted just swallows it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how bad you feel. You got to swallow it. And Kostya has swallowed this, and I didn't realize the anger and resentment that just came pouring out and being bottled up by me and David's 2-1 vote. Oh man, it's been really brutal for Kostya. So at the very least, this airing of grievances has allowed Kostya to let this out into the open.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the rules are rules. It's 2 versus 1. It's 2 versus 1, right? So I'm not going to just complain, every single week about it, just because I disagree with it. But this episode seemed like a good moment to bring it up.
Right, well, I'm willing. I'll tell you what, though. I will reflect on it. I will reflect.
Yeah, and this comes from, many comments in the Discord of people saying exactly this. They would want to go play their OTB club game, but because it doesn't count for the program, it's just they're much less motivated to do so. And let me just reiterate, we can keep the exact same requirements, right? But like we've done with other parts of the program, we often tell people look, you don't have to follow this 100%, but if you don't, then it's on you, right? You can't come crying to us oh, I'm not improving when you're not following our tips and advice, right? So we do offer some leniency.
Themselves, right? I mean, they could play a 90-minute game without the 30-second increment, and then they could go and check the box for themselves.
Yeah, but under a current system, that would be actively, deceitful.
But then we don't guarantee the results, right? I mean,
right. But at least we could say that it's still better than not playing the classical, playing blitz instead, not doing any chess work instead.
Is it unclear that Jesse and I think that a 45-minute game is better than another Puzzle Rush? Is that unclear to anybody?
Well, in the eyes of the program, those are equally worthless because they don't get any points. And we have this whole dojo points thing,
But I mean,
David, let's leave it. We could talk about this forever. Let's leave. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there's not gonna be back and forth. All right.
We can do it back and forth, but I mean that we can talk about that. That could be a whole dojo podcast right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Or we could offer partial credit, half points. I mean, I think there are reasonable solutions here. Okay. Well, that was my first thing. Okay. I'm glad I got that off my chest.
Sure. I mean, it's not guaranteed that you're wrong, Kostya. It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, sorry. I also just wanted to bring up this point. It's never been studied that 90 plus 30 is the minimum time control for improvement. That's just our intuition, right? It's never been studied in a scientific way which time controls are better. We all intuitively think longer is better, but it's not actually... it's not clear at what point you get the system 2 thinking and then when it becomes blitz.
But I think we're agreed that it has to be system 2 thinking. I think we are agreed there. And so, like David said, we can continue diluting it down and down and down. But for those players who aren't already doing system 2 thinking, we're just enabling them not to do it because system 2 thinking is hard. right? And so that's why we've kept up the standards, right? Me and David have said, no, Kostya, you shall not pass, dude. And yes, we could dilute it some more. Of course, we could dilute it some more. But part of the problem is most of these people are playing online, and it's so hard to get system two thinking even being online because you're distracted by a million different things. So, right, what the program is saying is, boss, you must find a way to do system two thinking, and a longer game is honestly your best chance to do it. Right?
All right, let's go on.
All right, David, you got a grievance against me, Kostya?
Well, maybe Jesse, you should go because that was me.
My grievance is going to be the same for both of you, so you might as well have David go first.
All right. What I disagree with Jesse most on is the notion that like everything has to be a competition for people to like put in real effort and bring out the best of them.
Mm.
And so this comes up most in like the sparring thing, right? That's the thing where I got outvoted on something, which I'm not bitter about. But for the sparring, I thought that, we would tell people, here's a certain position, practice it X number of times, where like X could be 8, but you could also say 6 or 10 or whatever, right? But, practice this position 8 times against somebody else, talk together about it in between and keep going from there. And Jesse wanted it to be like you have to sort of win a match with somebody to show that you have learned that position. I think that has some logistical, like X's and O's in practicality, in addition to being not necessarily critical for everybody. Like I think some people work fine in a more collaborative approach, and other people, maybe would benefit more from Jesse's approach of there being something at stake. But I think there's some variation in it, and people are different. I think a lot of people can work together and also improve. So I had a different conception on that. I feel like Kostya was a little bit closer to neutral on that one and voted with Jesse, but didn't have as strong or dogmatic or, well, I'm not going to repeat Kostya's F word, didn't have as dogmatic a take on it, but was somehow swayed by Jesse on this one.
Yeah, I would say I'm not. Yeah, I don't. I see both sides of it. Like I think there's lots of chess improvement that can be done in a non-competitive environment, but I also think it's fun when things are gamified, and that I definitely see the benefits of the added motivation there. So I'm definitely kind of 50-50 on this one.
Yeah, I can see it helping some people, but as you know, there were some positions where I think like, it's a win or a draw. You just have to prove it, right? And I had goals like win this position 3 times in a row. But there were others where it's like, just play it 8 times. If you can't beat your cohort members in this particular end game, like note that it's a weakness, but you don't have to keep getting beat down forever. Anyway.
Okay, I guess it's my turn.
Jesse, you didn't want to respond to that one, or?
Oh no, I think we have a fundamental difference there, and I'm happy with that. I do feel there is very much space in the program for non-competitive collaboration, though. We have people meeting to do book groups. We have people doing postmortems. We have people analyzing all kinds of stuff, and that is a beautiful thing. I'm definitely not opposed to that. But in terms of when you, let's say that you know the rook endgame progression. No, you got to prove that against somebody of your own level. Same thing for all the algorithms. It's a competitive process where you are learning something that you will then have to also prove in a competitive space, right? So, if you guys wanted to come about some individual thing and be like, dude, we need to make this non-competitive, I would be happy to, talk about it. But in general, like most of these things, these tests that we have, I feel they need to feel like an actual chess game.
I think a lot of chess players who benefit from competition are also naturally competitive. And so even if we tell them like you're just playing 8 games, they're going to try to,
Uh-huh.
with a plus score against their adversary. And anyway,
Yeah.
that's how it is for now.
Okay, I just want to begin by saying I love you guys. We're family.
All right,
We go back a ways,
let us
After
have it,
this,
Jesse.
hopefully we'll still be friends.
I think
Okay.
we already know what this is gonna be, but go on, go on.
I don't know. Well, maybe you guys see this is for both David and Kostya have the same problem. Okay, so let me back it up a little bit and say, taking Kostya and David out of the equation for a second, the biggest problem for chess improvement advice in general out there is not the specific pieces of advice, but the fact that you go on YouTube or some blog or some Twitter post, and they're always saying things like, this is what you need to do. And the individual suggestion might be in itself fine. But the problem is that when people get these individual suggestions, they don't have a program to follow because they're distracted by like, oh, this dude said this, other person said this, and then they're just all over the place and they don't have a path. Whereas what the program is really doing is it's saying, look, you can argue about maybe we don't have the exact best path. We can argue about it all day long. But the fact is we have a path. And if you trust the program, you don't have to, your mind is taken out of the equation of all the worry and fret about what I should do. And instead of these different pieces of advice that have nothing to do with where you are in your chess game, the program tells you pretty well, like if you're at 1600, boss, this is what you need to do. So my critique on David and Kostya is they themselves have yet to learn to trust the program. They do not trust the program, and they are spinning their wheels all over the place, not trusting the program, doing this, that, and the other thing, fully distracted. And one of the great things that Jack, our programmer, did is he now has really shamed people, man. And you can see if somebody has not done something in the last 7 days, you can see if they haven't done something in the last 30 days. And I will tell you right now, my dear friends, Kostya and David have been negligent and they're going off and they're doing all these other fancy things. Okay, so then the problem becomes a couple things. For one, in terms of the program, it sets a bad example. And I do think, and I believe this goes beyond just the training program, that whenever I've been a chess teacher, when I haven't been actively studying myself, I feel like a hypocrite, or maybe even like I shouldn't even be there. I have like some kind of complex about it. And I think rightly so. I feel like you should really be working on your game if you were going to be teaching somebody. So there's that. And also just as a fan of you guys, I am convinced that Kostya needs to become a GM, not just for his personal sense of self. And at least, the very least, needs to have be able to look back and say, I really gave it everything I had. And he's kind of like, dude's around 30 now. It's like, now is the time. If it's not going to get any easier. And so by following the program, dude could make it to GM. But dude is not following the program. And I'm concerned dude is not going to make it to GM. And therefore, it's a big problem. Pruess is in a slightly different circumstance where he says he's not trying to make GM. He says he's kind of retired. But I have said ever since Pruess kind of gave up that dream, I would say 2008, 2009, that I've always said that he was going to come back to it, because it's one of the things about chess players is there's something so beautiful about the game that you could try to quit chess, but I'm not sure chess is going to quit you. You know what I'm saying? So even in David's case, I feel like there's still there's going to be at some point either regret or the need to come back and do it. And the training program is the path to do it. And of course, also just if we're going to do the training program, you should do it to set an example, but also just to understand the program, right? Okay, so there it is. There's my critique on both of these.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
There's mainly
Sorry. Go ahead, David.
I agree with the whole idea that, to be a chess teacher, you mostly need to also be studying and striving yourself. And even if you don't need to, like maybe without studying like themselves anymore, a grandmaster could still be a better teacher than somebody else who'd never taught chess and never been a grandmaster, etc. But it'll certainly bring out the best in you when you're working on your own game. You'd be a much better teacher. I agree with that. But in my case, there are two major deviations from the program. But I am mostly following the program. But the deviations that I just don't have much time to do it. So I don't have a goal of becoming grandmaster because I know I don't have the time. It's not realistic, right? Like, I haven't played a chess tournament in 13 months, right? And I can't. I just literally can't. And if I can't play a tournament, then I'm not going to become a GM. So you have to make a goal that's realistic for you. I'm trying to improve at chess all the time, but I'm also always getting worse at chess as well in between the times when I do the work to improve, right? So I have to have like a more realistic goal that I'm, working on it when I can and trying to improve in the ways that I can. So that's like one element. And then I think like the main thing, like I disagree on, and it didn't rise to be like my number one bone of contention. But when I was thinking of this question, the number two bone of contention is like, I think that most of the high levels need a thing where you can just you can just do tactical exercises that are appropriate to your level. That's the extra work I do that's not in the program, is that. And I do that. I don't have the Made in Twos book, and I don't think it's necessarily better than doing the calculation work that I do. And I think the calculation work I do is missing. Like for most of the upper levels, the tactics are just out of a certain number of books. But if you finish those books, what are you supposed to stop solving tactics? I think that a certain amount of calculation, a consistent regimen of calculation, is super valuable and something that we should add to the higher levels of the program. And then I won't be straying once we add that.
Okay. Well, for me, there's a couple of things here. So there's two aspects to this. One is how much time and effort I'm putting into improving my chess, just in general. And then number two is like how much I'm following the program. So definitely think the first point is kind of more important. In terms of following the program, I've always had the issue that the three of us decided what the three of us need to do to try to get to 2,500 FIDE. To me, that's intuitively never felt sound. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've never trained someone to GM level. I've trained people to like master before, and up through the club ranks, but I don't actually think I know, right, like what it takes to get to GM. So like we came up with the program, and I do believe in a lot of aspects of it, like the sparring, I think you got to work on all your stuff. You got to analyze your games. You have to read lots and lots of books. But yeah, whether I'm doing the books that we chose or whether I'm doing books outside the program, to me, it's like, I don't see why that's such a big deal. Like, I'll give you an example. I've been doing for the past, week or so, I've been doing 2 hours of the new Shanklin calculation book every day. Just like 2 hours solving problems from that book. And it's hard. I've worked
on the same book.
Oh, great. That book's not in our program.
The exact same violation.
That book's not in our program. That's a very tough book. Honestly, it's not my favorite. Like a lot of the puzzles, I see the solution, and it's okay. It's not time for the book review, but like, the players in question, like all the examples are taken from top level games like MVL, Carlsen, all these strong grandmasters, Van Forest, Wesley. So no one ever finds the solution in the game. It's always stuff that was like found by the engine. None of these top players ever find it during the game, right? And so it's very, very tough, but some of the problems are doable. So anyway, that's one example, right? I was also reading this new Jan Markos book that he wrote with David Navarre. I actually went through the whole thing, right? So I'm reading like books that are outside the program. I don't think that's like the biggest crime in the world. So for me, I think the bigger question is the other thing that Jesse brought up is just like how motivated I am in terms of actually achieving the GM goal. And honestly, it is tough. Like, I've long believed that to make the most chess improvement possible, chess kind of has to be like your main thing. It has to be your main focus. And I remember when I was like 2360 FIDE and I was fighting for IM norms, and I was working very, very hard. I ended up going up to like 2420. And I remember during that time, chess was absolutely my number one passion. Like I would wake up hungry to study chess. All my other obligations were just done in service to be able to get back to studying chess. And I would do like several hours a day. I would do, solving studies, working on my openings, watching courses, reading books. I just loved it, right? I couldn't get enough of it. And of course I improved a lot, like by doing that. I also had a roommate, master level player. So we were working a lot together. These days when I wake up, honestly, like my main passion is like for the dojo, and I do a lot of work just like running the dojo, and it has nothing to do with my own chess improvement. It's just things like managing the Discord, managing the YouTube channels, managing our content, our Twitch, our Patreon page, our Twitter. We have like social media platforms now, Instagram, TikTok. Thankfully, over the last couple of months, I've been able to like delegate a lot of that stuff out. So now we have great people like doing work that in the past I was doing, right? So I don't know, for me, it is very tough to focus on chess improvement because it's like I'm just not able to have like two main things in my head. It's either I'm all in on the chess improvement or I'm not all in, but it's like only one can really be the main focus. You can't have two main focuses. That's not how main focuses work. So, it's kind of a mindset struggle. Obviously, I'm playing a lot of chess, as you guys know, so I'm still very much interested. And one thing I have been working on as of late, like last, a couple months or so, that I think is important is I started like working out and exercising more, because I was reflecting on it and I strongly feel like in terms of my chess knowledge, I'm way ahead of where I was a couple of years ago. My rating has been pretty much the same. Maybe it's the rating deflation. I don't know. I do think keeping your rating these days is kind of an achievement. But in terms of my knowledge, I feel way ahead. But in terms of like my skill level, I started finding myself like blundering more in tournaments, like making mistakes. To me, it's felt like a lack of energy. And then I can feel it during the tournaments, during the later rounds, I just get tired, demotivated. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't defend as well as I could be defending. And I kind of feel like that's like a physical thing. So I have been trying to like improve my physical shape, in order to improve my tournament performance. So yeah, I would say, number one, yeah, I definitely still, very much am in pursuit of the goal. But yeah, it's, okay, obviously I don't have kids like you guys, but for me, the dojo, like that's my baby. It's like, that's what I'm constantly focused on. So that's my defense.
Yeah. Let me just yell at you a little bit, Kostya. I'm going to make this gentle. Okay, look. I think reading outside books is fine, especially if you have an eye to being like, oh, maybe they should be in the program. Like Nose Knows All, Michael Franco recommended this book, Strategic Chess Exercises. So I've been doing that a little bit. Fine. I don't have any problem with that. Where I have a problem, though, boss, is you haven't put any games up into the dojo database. You haven't been sparring. And that's what you need to become a GM. Further, yes, like we haven't trained anybody to become a GM. I trained myself to become a GM. Sure, I know what it takes. I know what you need to do, boss. It's actually not that hard. And I can feel your distraction, dude, doing all this other stuff. So I'm just saying it's there and you can do both. By the way, you're doing great work. I love what we're doing with the dojo. I'm with you all 100%. But I feel like it is part of our thing to also be participating in the dojo. It's, it's both as a player. Yes, it's gratifying to have success, but also to be a participant in the thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, on the game analysis thing, right, I have been struggling with the annotation of games. Not sure exactly why. I used to annotate my games quite a bit. I would like annotate every game. But yeah, I don't know. That's been a weird block for me. I definitely do mean to upload. Like, I have a bunch of games analyzed. It's just, I don't know. For some reason, it's hard. I am a perfectionist. So for me to upload a game, it has to be like, oh, it's 100% done. And that's a hard point to get to. But yeah, no, I mean, point taken there for sure.
Did you recently get mated? Well, it's time to join the ChessDojo training program. Or maybe you just enjoy this fine content. Give us some money on the Patreon. I need to keep the lights on, and with inflation, it's really hard for Kostya to be buying that avocado toast.
Okay.
All right. That was intense.
That was intense. David, you still haven't yelled at Kostya, dude. I don't think. Have you already yelled at him?
I don't have anything to yell at him about. My main disagreement with him is about the time controls, and I'm strongly convinced that I'm right. I just,
Yeah.
I mildly tend to think that I'm right about it.
Okay. Well, I still have one for David.
Oh, shit.
Oh.
Yeah, I did one for Jesse on the time controls. So for David, I think your approach to engines and engine use is way too dogmatic.
Okay.
And so if I understand correctly, you think
As long
players...
as it's not fascist.
No, you're fascist, dude. You began with fascist. So far, I haven't heard anything fascist, dude.
I just mean stringent, just very strict.
Dude, you're like Putin talking about the Ukrainians, man.
Okay.
Take it easy.
Fascists aren't just stringent, they will also genocide you.
Yeah, of course you guys aren't full. Okay, anyway. Just the word. It was just the word. So if I understand David's position correctly, he believes that if you're under somewhere around 2200, you should not be using engines at all, for anything.
Maybe when I first took that position, I hadn't taken into account deflation, so we could say 2150 or 2040 or something. But something, yeah. I mean, there's a line where it's I think a disservice to people. Okay,
and while I definitely agree with the spirit of your position, so if I could strongman your point of view, it's the engine definitely confuses people, and a lot of especially lower level players, under 1,000, under 1,200, when they use the engine, it's they might not even be capable of understanding what the engine is actually telling them, and it creates this kind of
argument all the way up to 2,000, 2,100 Kostya, and that's I don't think that they even understand what the engine's saying.
Fair. And so they get this kind of false sense of learning where the engine tells them some evaluation in some position and they think they took something away from that, whereas in reality they actually got nothing out of it, right? They're never going to use that piece of information ever again, and it doesn't help them actually improve their chess. And I definitely sympathize with that. I think for all players, the way to improve your chess is you have to work on your own analytical skills. So your ability to look at a position, analyze variations, try to come up with the best moves for both sides, try to evaluate the position properly. You have to do that work yourself.
Yep, I agree with you too.
Great. Thank you. Okay, but on that, I feel like there is some room there. And I don't think you have to be 2,000 or 2,200 to be able to work with an engine intelligently. So a good rule of thumb that I would suggest to people is that if you can't explain in your own words why the engine is saying something or why the engine is giving an evaluation, then you haven't truly understood the position, right? So if you can't explain why in this equal material position the engine is saying +3, if you can't explain it's because of this plan and white's going to break here and then win and break through and crash and win material here. If you can't explain it, or you can't explain the concrete variations yourself, black has this move that attacks this thing, you have to defend it like this, and then there's this move and that wins 2 pawns, then I would agree you didn't actually get what the engine is telling you, and then it's not useful, maybe even actively harmful. But I feel like there is, again, a way to work with the engine intelligently, where you're sparring with it, you're challenging its evaluation. So you're not just blindly assuming that everything the engine says it's true, especially if you're working with like a browser engine, like on chess.com or Lichess. Those tend to not even be very, very strong. Actually, okay, I had a funny moment on stream recently where I was on Chessable doing Van Perlo's Endgame Tactics, which is in the program, by the way. And my solution ended up in this rook and pawn endgame that I knew 100% is winning. And they told me it's wrong. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I checked it with the engine, and the engine also was saying it's wrong. And then it turned out the engine was just at a low depth. And then I just played through the moves, and sure enough, the eval went to, plus 50. So I was totally right? So these engines, okay, like they can't actively just give you wrong information if you're not using them correctly. But again, I feel like there is room there, and the engine can save a lot of time. Especially like, if someone wastes 30 minutes banging their head against the wall because they can't figure out a puzzle, and it turns out that puzzle is way too hard for them, or maybe there wasn't even a solution in the first place, and it's like that engine could have saved them some time if they were, willing to check it. The other thing is just the practical aspect. Engines are very widely available. People are going to use engines to aid in their training. So to just say like, no, don't ever do it, it's like, that's asking a lot of people. I think that's really asking a lot. And we should, instead of just saying, never use engines ever, which I think no one is going to be able to follow, I think we should just educate people on how to understand when the engine is useful and when it's not, right? It'd be like if a workout coach, was telling you like, just like you can't eat any junk food ever, just zero junk food at all. And that's probably like good advice, but you also have to realize that like very few people are going to be able to follow that. And then when they can't follow that, then they just, the diet just goes off the rails for a lot of folks. So I feel like we have to work with people. The other thing I want to bring up is our eval bar policy. We have a policy. It's like no eval bar on the stream. And again, I agree with kind of like the spirit of this, but the eval bar, I just want to bring up the point, it actually brings a lot of people into the game. So for example, if you have someone who's very new, who's like a total beginner, they can look at the eval bar and at least get a sense that they have some idea about what's going on into the position. When we do commentary and there's no eval bar, there's no anything, what often happens, as I imagine, people come into the stream, we're talking about some Carlsbad thing. Oh, this Carlsbad position, I think it's a better version because the bishop's on f4, not on g5. They're just going to tune out. They don't even know what the Carlsbad is, right? We can't stop every 2 seconds and explain to people, exactly what's going on. So a good commentator, in my point of view, can use the engine and still make things incredibly instructive for people without just overly relying on it and just constantly saying, oh, this is what the engine thinks, this is what the engine thinks. And a good example of that is Daniel Naroditsky, a friend of ours. He's one of the best commentators out there, in my opinion. And when he's on chess.com, I think he's pretty much always using the eval bar. That's their policy. And he makes things incredibly instructive. Like when I watch him, I learn tons of stuff. And he's strong enough to explain to the viewers when the engine is giving some nonsense that shouldn't be paid attention to, and when it actually, shows a good point that we can maybe think about. And it's also very interesting, like if a strong player has one evaluation, the engine says another thing, I would of course say like we should listen more to like the human evaluation, but to me that doesn't mean that we should just never use the engine ever and just totally discard it. So
I mean, I used the engine on stream today, Kostya. I think you have misinterpreted how dogmatic you think I am about it. I have always said that, for some people it can be useful, and I've said that there's a danger with it as well. And the don't use an engine until you're 2200 or whatever, right? That, if we can go step by step, that is a shortcut. It's a shortcut. It's like on balance, you'll be better served by just not using the engine. That's the easiest and fastest thing I can tell you, right? When we give people advice, it doesn't necessarily mean we expect them to that we think that they're going to follow it to the T, right? We're giving the best advice we can. I think that you know, for I think that everybody learns differently. Some people can learn a little bit with the engine. Some people can learn a lot, et cetera, right? It's the same thing with playing Blitz. Some people can get better by playing Blitz. Other people can't. Um, there's a very big danger with using the engine. Not just that you'll waste your time, but that like you actively learn to turn off your brain and get worse at calculating, right? I think that on average, if I get to tell you two sentences and you're 1800, the thing I'm best off telling you is like just don't use the engine. Like the risk is much higher than the potential benefit or reward, right? The situations you mentioned where somebody might be able to learn something with the engine, I mean, that was like somebody who's like working really hard and somebody who honestly sounded like they were about as good as you. Not they didn't sound 1300 or 1600 in your description. Um, so I'm not 100% dogmatic or expect people to not do it all. I'm just trying to give the best advice I can in like a shorthand there. And I'm counteracting as well a lot of people doing things in the opposite direction and giving them something to think about with my opinion on it. I use the engine on stream to double check things all the time. I actually think that I should use the engine more because people at my level often do, and it's something that I neglected and didn't learn to do enough. Um, in general, I will try to solve something first and then use the engine to check it. And usually I'll be good enough to understand whether the engine is agreeing or disagreeing with me and why. But I mean, at what level do you think people start being able to learn something from the engine?
For
You
me,
know, there's got to be some line. Like you talked about 1200. I mean, it's got to be way higher than that. Like a 1600 is not going to understand any equal material position where it says +3. I mean, it's just that's basically not going to happen.
I would put it, yeah, definitely higher than 1200. But I'll give you my example. When I was probably around like 1800 or so, okay, I was starting to work on my chess quite hard, and I would definitely use the engine when, for example, I would go through a book and some line isn't mentioned or some obvious move to me isn't mentioned, and I'm like, well, why isn't this good? Or some evaluation is given. I remember going through the Shirov book, and he ends at a position where he's down a piece, and he's like, black's attack is obviously crushing, and I'm just like, what? And I trust them, but at the same time I don't see it, right? And then I check with the engine, I play what I think is the best defense, the engine shows to me why Shirov is right. To me, I found that a very, very useful component of my training, just getting that feedback from the engine, especially when you have a question that's not answered. Obviously we have a Discord, we have a whole community, but that takes a lot more time than just feeding a position into the engine and quickly checking like what it thinks. So I feel like if people, again, do it in a smart way where you first come up with your own ideas and you're checking the engine as like feedback, to me, I think you can definitely get use from that.
Right. And I give that advice too, like all the time on stream. I've mentioned that, like, try and figure something out for yourself first, then check it. It's obviously better than not doing that, right? I mean, did you use engines when you were 1600 and 1800?
Honestly, they weren't yet around. So like as I was hitting like 17, 1800, I think that's when engines started becoming a thing. Like, okay, first one was that I used was like Ripka. I think had like just come out. So I was even using like Deep Junior back in the day. But I would use them very sparingly. Sorry?
At what rating level were you when Ripka came out or Deep Junior?
Ripka, I think I was around 1800 or so.
Yeah, well, Ripka was definitely better than 1800, right? So it could give you a bunch of mind-boggling variations. Ripka was good. I mean, it was super GM level.
Yeah. No, I mean, those old engines were definitely like nonsensical in terms of some of the moves they would suggest. Like if you compare them to today's engines, right, they just look like jokes.
Okay, but if you compare them to like today's GMs, like they're amazing, right? So What I wanted to ask you, but I guess you use them sparingly, so you may not have much data, is like at what level did they start becoming useful to you? Were you able to use them and be like, oh, I learned something, I understood the variation,
Basically, I
and
just feel like it
and
was
remembered it?
once I was mature enough to kind of like start working with the engine intelligently. So
Mhm.
so somewhere around there, like I don't remember using it a lot, but also, yeah, the engines weren't as strong as they are today. Like I would be very skeptical of an eval of an engine back then. Like today, I would be skeptical of any kind of Ripka eval.
Sure.
But Stockfish, like they really have made like insane progress with the engine.
Yeah, but my question is just like at what level? Yeah, I was seeing it from your own experience. You could calibrate at what level it starts becoming useful. Like at what point are you able to learn from it? But okay, I'll take a different tack. Like everybody's got limited time. They're going to do this or that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? Like, do you honestly think the odds are higher or lower that somebody rated 1800 working for half an hour with the engine or half an hour without the engine, which is going to produce better learning and training for them? Right? Like they could use the engine intelligently, right? What are the odds they're going to do it in a better way than if they'd worked on their own, and that they're going to remember the lessons, etc., right?
Well,
Really going to gain from it. Versus
I'm
if they just worked on their own without an engine. Like how bad would it be? Is
but
an
I'm
1800
not
out on
comparing
something?
like, I'm not comparing 30 minutes of them having an engine open and going through a game. Like I don't suggest having the engine open while you're going through a game and then checking every line against the engine to see what the end. Let me make that very clear because that's actually huge pet peeve of mine when people like go through these classic books and then they keep an eye on the engine to like double check what the author is saying. No, read the author's words first. I'm saying use the engine when you have a specific question that you want answered or something specific you don't understand. And I was really responding because I was thinking that you're just saying like, I thought you were saying don't even use the engine in that scenario either because you're just saying like just don't use engines at all.
In general, I think the number of scenarios where the engine is going to be useful to a lower rated player are very, very tiny because it has to both provide them an answer that they can understand and they have to remember that answer, right? In order to remember that answer, I think in general, they have to have worked on the question themselves first and only then seen the answer. If you just see an answer and you haven't worked for it, I think generally it's very, very rare that you'll absorb it. But again, Kostya, don't over over believe that this is all dogma. I know there's some people whose brains work differently. Someone who will like read some computer lines and like they'll remember them. Okay. Most people are going to remember if they work for something rather than if they get it. Right. So often you could work for 30 minutes and never figure out the answer, but get better from having worked versus somebody else who asked the computer and saw what the answer is and then forgot the answer. Like that person will actually not improve as much.
Well, yeah, I think we can definitely agree that like working more, just using your own brain and trying to like figure stuff out, I think that that's just helpful. Like regardless of whether you get to the solution or not, like using your brain, trying to calculate stuff, that is going to be helpful. But yeah, I would, right. I'm fighting against the notion that people should never turn on the engine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, it's all fine. It's all good. It's all... I'm not mad. I'm not mad. But okay. I think maybe we're closer than I originally thought on this.
Yeah.
So which is good. Jesse, did you want to weigh in at all or
No.
no?
No. And I'll just say my own 2 cents of it is obvious is that, I mean, I kind of do it when I review my own games on the stream is that full throttle with your own analysis. And you might come up with some questions at the very end where you're like, okay, it's these 2 moves. I'm going to check with the engine because I'm curious, or especially after you've looked at it, maybe with a coach. Sometimes I don't even do that, but there could be moments where you're like, dude, well, let's see what the machine says. So it's not to say the machine doesn't have anything important to say. It's just that when you do your own analysis, if you let the machine in too early, you're not going to be thinking yourself. And what are you training yourself to do? You're training to think for yourself. So simple. To my mind, it's a very simple argument.
Yeah. I mean, I see a place where, you know, masters who are trying to cover huge amounts of material could get help from an engine that can give them some answers on questions they've thought about, and it can speed things up. That's basically like the advantage of what the engine can do. It can speed things up. It can confirm if you are right or wrong. It can double check your answers for you. Like, let's say instead of having a book with solutions at the back, you've just got a bunch of positions. You could pick out just complicated positions from random games you've seen and use those as tactical exercises. But then you don't have an answer key. The engine can be your answer key. But again, you have to be strong enough to understand it, right? But the main value is that it can speed things up quite a bit. For lower rated players, like a 1700 doesn't need to have this insane body of knowledge where they like know the answers to all these positions, right? They just need to be getting better at thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's not just a matter of speeding things up. I definitely learned a ton of stuff from engines. You know, like we've all had the experience where the engine gives an evaluation you strongly disagree with, but as you analyze and you analyze, you know, it just proves that it's right. And eventually you have a much better, you know, evaluation of that kind of position. You know, typical example I think a lot of people have is when sometimes you have an attack, the enemy king is wide open, but there's no immediate threats. And the engine will still say +5, +8, because it can already calculate that all your pieces are coming in and it's going to be mate as long. You just have to make a couple of improving moves. That kind of situation, I think like the engine can be super, super helpful, where it's like just totally, you know, challenging your thinking of the position. And I do think players of all levels can have that experience. It's harder if you're low rated, but just that question of like, does my evaluation match up with the engine? Can I understand why it doesn't? I think that can be a very useful exercise in and of itself.
Yeah, again, I just think you have to be pretty strong if you're going to be able to extrapolate why an engine thinks a certain position and attack is +3 or 4, despite there not being concrete threats yet.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's not that hard to, you just spar against the engine. Here's how you do it, folks. You make moves that you would play. You let the engine play the best move. It crushes you. Try to understand how it's crushing you. At some point, you know, it's going to start taking your pieces, right? So go back, try a different defense. It's going to crush that too. Eventually you start to get a feeling for, you know, the resources that the engine is seeing.
Then switch sides of the board and see if you can crush the engine from the position that it just showed you how to crush. And if you can't, you'll see that you weren't yet strong enough to use the engine.
That's funny.
It all fell on hollow ears. If the engine crushes you from the -3 side of it,
that'd be a good test. Okay. All right. I think that's it. That was fun, folks. Our Patreon is open. If you want to submit questions for the future, subscribe at any tier. You can post your question, and maybe we'll fight about it one day.
We were very impressed with this question. So
that's a good one.
Yeah.
If y'all can come up with some more questions like that, we will be very grateful to you.
And if you're a friend of this podcast and are not yet in the training program, send us some money. We need it. Kostya needs avocados. It's inflation. Let's go.
Thank you, Jesse. All right, folks. See you next time.